And we are live, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. Welcome back. Thank you for being subscribers. Thank you for being members. And thank you for joining me live, watching this back. If you see this, we are going to jump right into my 2025 best ball spring and summer portfolio overviews, talk about my highest and lowest exposures, reviewing those teams yet again, or reviewing the players that I, going into the summer, was viewing as potential targets, potential fades, um, based on profiles, based on where they are going on the board, what we can draft later on. Um, but this is when everything starts to hit. Um, let's jump right into it. I am using, over the summer, I used the Best Ball Overlay um, tool. I thought it was very for me in that I was able to, oops, there it is, that I was able to see my exposures throughout the year. Where do I want myself placed? That's fine. Maybe that's not big enough. There, that's good enough. Um, but in the NFL 2025 pre-draft best ball, I did 50 drafts. We will go into that later on. In Superflex, we did only 25 of the bigger Superflex. In Eliminator, I only did 15. A lot of people liked the Eliminator. I was hoping to do more so later on down the line. I actually didn't like the structure of most of your teams getting out super early in the season. Um, I just want to sweat the whole season as opposed to chunks of the season. That's why I was more of a fan of the sprint and the marathon. However, those I also got low volume in on just because I was pushing it off. And then lo and behold, we just had more tournaments that came out in August. Um, I feel like last year there was more tournaments in June and July and August, or it was more even as opposed to this year. I also just got a lot of volume in across all the puppies. Um, and I always wanted to shoot for those single shot, or maybe a handful of shot tournaments, like the Pitbull. I think that one was my favorite tournament of all, the Golden. Um, and then I did 2 rookie sophomore picks just to get my guys. I did that early. Um, that's more like a battle royale. I'm probably gonna look into that this season and do that battle royales and more in season tournaments type stuff next year if all goes well this summer. Um, but next year I also want to double the volume that I did this year if all goes well. Hopefully, up to the Lord, up to God. Um, but without further ado, like we're here, like you guys are doing here, we are gonna hop into. We are going to look into my 2025 NFL season exposures. 447 of the 553. I don't know the percentage of that, but we are going to go to the best ball overlay. Share the screen instead. My highest exposed player was Brandon Ayuk, 31.3%. If we go to underdog, we share this screen, exposures, it says Brandon Aiyuk at the top. Tetairoa McMillan. Let's go back to the best ball overlay. Share the screen. Tetairoa McMillan at 31.3%. Also my highest exposed. I'm so glad that Tet wasn't actually the highest exposed player. Last year I had Gabe Davis as the highest exposed player. That didn't go so well for me. I just feel like now it's a jinx more so. My highest exposed player gets jinxed, doesn't come back, doesn't produce. So maybe Juwan Jennings and Ricky Pearsall also hurt me, and George Kittle. I think that's fine. To be honest, I was also fading those guys a lot. Which is why you've seen a lot of Brandon Aiyuk. I was picking majority of him up after the suspension or the IR, after he was put on IR, after we were told that he wasn't going to be in for the start of the season like we thought he wouldn't have been. I think he is more likely to come around back, like Shanahan said, around week 6. I don't think they're looking to ramp him up. Juwan Jennings gets the contract extension today, only $3 million. Extended. That's only for this year. They got away with a smaller contract who produced quite a bit last year. Basically, he gets a new car, an exotic car, Juwan, but it's nothing that Aiyuk got last year. And I think the 49ers are going to be looking for him down the stretch to produce. I got him today in one of my later puppies, in one of my last puppies tonight. Brandon Aiyuk at 158, I believe. I thought that was an absolute smash. When you're getting a guy later down the season, he can still have a couple of weeks where he can produce with Brock Purdy to get open and such like that. Going to Tetairoa McMillan, I think the bet on him this year was the bet I was making with Malik Neighbors, but at a much less smaller clip. Last year I only took about 15% Neighbors. I thought actually he was a lot better than Marvin Harrison when I was watching film of him, and not so much Brian Thomas, but Rome Odunze as much. But he had the yak capabilities. He had great hands. I just thought he was a guy that I can see producing at the next level, which Neighbors did. This year, when I was evaluating the prospects, Tetairoa McMillan was not the highest on my board. I liked Ibuka a lot. I actually liked Travis Hunter a lot. Now that one I think is going to possibly bite me in the butt. I wish I was a little bit overexposed to him in the teens, like 15%. I'm only at about 10% at the end of this year with Travis Hunter. I just thought that on a week-to-week basis, earlier than round 6, I thought it was a difficult bet. I always thought Ibuka should have probably went over him. Matthew Golden probably as well, just because of the cornerback usage Hunter was using. But going back to Tetairoa McMillan, I thought he was a clear probably number 1 after after Travis Hunter. I liked actually Travis Hunter's route running capabilities a tad bit more, his hands. But the yak, the middle of the field ability that Tetairoa had in college They were also able to use him a lot in terms of volume. I think Bryce Young is more than capable of using him and getting him the ball, and Ted producing at another level. Ted was going between middle round 3 to late round 4 in underdog specifically. That's what I'm looking at. I grabbed a few shares in DraftKings and Terrell McMillan at like the end of the fourth, middle of the fourth, early fourth round. I thought he was an absolute smash there as well without needing touchdowns. Maybe he doesn't get as many touchdowns as I'm hoping for, but I think we can take him as high as the 112 next year. Maybe even the 110. Ben Gretsch at Stealing Signals. Rotoviz Stealing Bananas on YouTube says we can take Terrell McMillan next year as high as the 109. I think some of that is predicated on how good the offense is going to be. I don't think he'll be going over guys if they fall, like a CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson if they fall, Puka Nakua's. But I do think, so if I'm really rethinking it, if I want to bet again on 10 next year, my exposures this year say two things. It says three things. It says they're going to be good. They're going to be picked higher than they were going this year. They're going to either be hitting in the playoff weeks, or they're going to be hitting throughout the season. And I think the latter two of my conclusions of my thesis is that they kind of coincide and correlate, where they're hitting in the early part of the season, but also at the end of the year. Last year we were seeing Brian Thomas hitting in the beginning of the year and later really hitting at the end of the year. Malik Neighbors as well. That's the reason why I kind of, in a second year in a row, I kind of went with the approach of fading the hurt guys. 5% Joe Mixon, basically like 2% Chris Godwin, really betting on profile situations, how maybe this guy can be used, the offense progressing or regressing, which takes me to the third guy, in my opinion, Jaden Blue. I think losing Micah Parsons kind of hurts him in the rushing game, but I do not think that Jaden Blue is losing any workload or losing significant workload down the season when we need him most. I was taking him mostly as a fifth while running back early in the season, and later in the season I was taking him more as the third or fourth running back as we continued to get positive steam on better running backs going later or falling running backs going earlier in the off season. Rico Dowdle was my highest exposed player throughout the entire season, until probably about 2 weeks ago, as Brandon Ayuk continued to fall. I was basically betting on Rico Dowdle taking about 20 to 30% of the rushing down usage, keeping Chuba Hubbard healthy. I think he was a target for Carolina. I think they wanted to get deep into their offensive core to help out Bryce Young. I think they really are excited for this season. The Carolina Panthers. My highest exposed players are Carolina Panthers, Tetairoa McMillan, Rico Dowdle, Ja'Tavion Sanders, and Bryce Young, and Xavier Legette down here. But I really think Rico Dowdle's set up to take about 20 to 30 of the workload in Carolina, and he was not being drafted as such. I think he should have been kind of drafting, being closer to Tyler Algier. I think you could even said that those two could have flipped, in my opinion, in ADP. Braylon Allen was one that was able to jump in ADP probably because of the steam that he was getting, whereas Rico was not. But I think Rico, at least early in the season and later on down the season, if something were to happen to Chuba Hubbard, I think he gets a good amount of the workload he was able to produce last year as the number one running back in Dallas last year. I think he gets a better O-line this year. I think Chuba Hubbard gets most of the workload, but I don't think he gets all of it. I don't think he gets 90-10 because of his pass. I think they're going to use him in the pass game more than Rico Dowdle will. I just think he was a very underrated player, in my opinion. He has both the upside capability of something like that were to happen, and then to be used week in and week out, also to give Chuba a breather, maybe even down by the goal line. The next player on my board is Ja'Tavion Sanders. He also didn't get much steam, actually, even in this past month, as he's looking better as the team progresses in the pass game. He probably will split workload, which is why he goes so low. But I think he is a bit on more so touchdowns and volume per se. I think he can probably get to 50 yards a game, probably about 600 yards and 4 to 5 touchdowns this year. At the high end, 700 yards and 8 touchdowns from Bryce. Tucker Kraft was another one of my players that stayed extremely high in my draft boards. I was hammering him early in the offseason. I think I played it extremely well this summer, or early in the offseason. I targeted a whole bunch of guys that I thought were going to climb in ADP. I think that's what you want to do. You want to target as many of your guys early in the offseason that you think will climb, or even the rookies that you think will climb, or like undervalued rookies. And then you want to play draft at ADP as close as possible so that you're getting the best price. And then as the year regresses and progresses and we hear things on social media, through websites, then we can adjust accordingly. I was also always adjusting my ranks, and I always felt like these players were sticking out the most on draft boards. Yes, I was mixing up other players on other builds, but I just always thought that Carolina was undervalued as a team this year. especially what we saw from Bryce last year. Tucker Kraft. Going to Tucker Kraft, I think Tucker Kraft undervalued. He could be the number one target in Jordan Love's offense. They could have tougher games that they're playing. I think he can get in the end zone a bunch more. I do fear that Luke Musgrave does take a little bit more of the usage than we saw last year. And Matthew Golden. And then the other wide receivers, I think actually Christian Watson comes back later on in the year, and I was picking him up later in the 18th round in a couple of puppies in best ball, in a couple of final my best ball manias. I have about 5% of him on those Baltimore, Cincinnati, or Baltimore, Green Bay stack week 17 bringbacks. I just think he was a player. We saw him. He came off injury late, but we saw clips of him at least running, or one clip of him. On Underdog, it says he'll be ready by week 5, which is actually really nice to hear. And I think in round 18, in 14 through 18, you're going to want to. What I've noticed is I'd like to not just get one guy, but a plethora of guys down there. Where I thought if it fits the build, you want to reach on guys that are way past even ADP of 216 that aren't being drafted, because they can probably hit in a little way that is good for even maybe your team to advance, or going into next season. Maybe they are 12th round, 15th round picks next year that were going undrafted. My water's spilling. J.K. Dobbins or Bryce Young, another Carolina piece. I thought that was significantly undervalued. An underdog rushing upside matters. Touchdowns at the goal line matter if you're a rushing quarterback. And then, like I said, I liked Carolina this year. J.K. Dobbins. The moment he got traded, I wasn't targeting him at all. And I mean at all during when he was going lower on the draft board early in May. And so that's one of the picks that I wasn't really going after. Chess Liam liked him at that price. I was more onto the assumption that they brought in a guy, they drafted a guy, and he's probably a pick maybe in my portfolio that I should have just bet on the younger guy, RJ Harvey, more. But I chased the climb with J.K. Dobbins immediately as he got traded to Denver. I scooped him up wherever I could in every draft until he got to around 111, 112, where his ADP laid for the rest of the season. In my rankings, I think throughout the year, I had him as high as pick 97, probably as low as 125, 130 after the trade. At the trade, like the Rico Dowdle trade, said this guy is going to be at least used in some form or fashion this year, and we're going to bring in the rookie slowly or the other piece is going to have a role, but he's going to be used, J.K. Dobbins, and that's why he was brought in. Woody Marks was actually the latter. I wasn't too into him all off season. Only $405 on him. He was a player I was mostly drafting in August, late July and August. I just thought as the season got closer, as we got closer to this season, he was a target for the Texans in their actual draft. Joe Mixon not coming back, maybe at the end of the year, but I think the situation said they're a team that, because they're in defensive oriented minded, coached staff, coached team, led team, this team is gonna at least want to try and run the ball and give him some carries. And so it was like a cheap bet on Jayden, on like a cheaper Jaden Blue, slightly worse profile, but I thought he could work. Nick Chubb, I don't have any. Like I don't have any Javonte. Maybe lower than 5% of both of those guys combined. I just didn't like where they were going throughout the season. And then once they climb, it's like an even worse bet. I just wanted to bet on the cheaper piece, the piece that the team actually went out and got in the draft per se. And so that was the Woody Marks bet. And then later in the season, in August, I really looked at my rankings, moved him up significantly to about 160, and I was willing to draft him around there, and around his ADP. Jackson Dart, I liked him pre-draft, and he's a guy I think that can be Drake May at the low end, at the high end, Bo Nix. This year he played very well in preseason. You could even say better than Caleb Williams. Offensive minded coach, weapons that I think we all like, or at least will be competent for him. I think he's actually set up quite well, and even to some extent better than Drake May, especially at his cost. I think he should have went up at least 2 to 3 to 5 rounds earlier, to around Bryce Young, Geno Smith range, just because we think he's going to play at least 10 games this year, or at least I do. I think he comes in around week 6 to 8. Earliest at week 4. I think they give Russell a couple games, but I think he significantly helped Jackson Dart, Russell Wilson, throughout the draft process. I mean, throughout the summer, and being with an offensive-minded head coach, I think this team is set up very well. Vishal Tutin, third down usage, Liam Cohen offense. Their GM, before he even gets hired, says, I like this guy in this round. They're able to lock him up. I think he could be a bet. There's a lot of bets, I think, this year. Tutin, Scadaboo, Braylon Allen to some extent. Jaden Higgins, Jalen Noel. There's other players, maybe even Brashard Smith. A lot of these running backs that I think could be misses this year, potential Trey Benson's of this 2025 year, that we're just drafting a little bit high, that we hope we got to see more of this year, that we don't. However, I think his profile is good enough. He's a good enough runner to potentially get on the field late in the season, and he's a guy that you want to have. Jordan Addison, only missing 3 games. He's looked good. Maybe even the number 1 target for J.J. McCarthy. Players getting injured around him. He seems to be one of the healthier players, despite the suspension he's going to undertake this year and early in the offseason. But I think he will not have a slow start once he gets back onto the field and earning targets with JJ. Being on the field, unlike Brandon Ayuk last year, being on the field with JJ McCarthy or in the offseason is going to help him earn those targets. I don't think Adam Thielen does anything to Addison. Probably takes more touches away, I think, to the running backs and tight end. I liked Hawkinson. You see my exposure down at the screen there at his price until they had the Adam Thielen move. I just think that hurts him, and I think he should have went lower and now Hawkinson later in the year. I just really liked the Jordan Addison price. Then he slips more, and you got him at a better price. In Underdog, more specifically, also you saw him as a guy that can earn touchdowns. I think he actually earns more volume this year than we've seen previously. I think he's a better Josh Downs than we give him credit for. A better number 2 than we give him credit for. Especially where we are drafting an underdog. Like I said, I think he gets more volume this year than we think. He breaks 1,000. Maybe he regresses in touchdowns, but he's like probably more of a Zay Flowers bet, but with touchdowns in an offensive driven team that we all, I think, should like. Tank Bigsby, 20% Tank Bigsby. It's something that I liked. Another pick that I was not drafting early in the year because of the Tootin bet, because Travis Etienne has been a question mark. Because I was targeting Rico Dowdle so much. In hindsight, I would have probably Tank Bigsby as my highest exposed running back, and not Rico, or even it out with Tank, Braylon, Rico, all 3 guys that I think should have been going where they're going now. But only 2 of those 3 guys have risen up. I just think Tank Bigsby, people are kind of pushing away from what he did last year. I think Liam Cohen is more of a film guy, an analytics guy. I think he is going to use his running backs the best way possible for this Jaguars offense. I think Tank Bigsby is in for a big year in Jacksonville. I think they actually run the ball than we actually think they do. That's going to hurt my Brian Thomas bags. But I think Brian Thomas can get there. Xavier Legette and the Carolina Panthers bet. Jayden Higgins was actually a later bet that I was doing. If you see the number here, he was a guy that actually I thought should have been rising with the rookies. I actually liked his profile. I thought he was in the pre-draft process, kind of like a cheap Tetero McMillan. I think in the pre-draft process, I think I have a bit more of Higgins in pre-draft than Tet. I just thought he was kind of a guy that was being slept on this entire year. I think he's another guy that if I would redo this year again, I would probably have more in the 20s than in the teens. But I'm glad I slammed him at the end of the year. Brian Thomas Jr., my highest, I think, first round player that we've come to. He was my flag plant first round guy. I thought, like Shawn Siegel, I thought he just got touchdowns, got volume, gets an upgrade at the coaching position. Another year fully with another summer with Trevor Lawrence. If the scheme is good enough for him, I think he breaks 1350 and 7 touchdowns. I think he can have 1,500 yards and 12 touchdowns at most. I think he can pull off on Amon-Ra St. Brown year 3 this year. Brian Thomas Jr. I think it's kind of a double down on your guy. He was my guy last year, and I kind of shied away from him as well as Neighbors, and that his situation was good. Last year I didn't think he had much competition with Kirk and Davis, which is why I had so much Davis, because he was going as the cheapest piece in the Jaguars offense last year. But Brian Thomas was the piece that I really wanted the most out of those pieces last year. I had about 12 to 15% Brian Thomas last year. I think this year it was just like, go with your guys. Like I of course did bet on some guys that were rising, some coach speak guys that I thought we could possibly speech on. But it was mostly prices, guys that could pay off their ADP from this year, guys that were set up to succeed this year, guys that had healthy off seasons, guys that I thought can increase their volume and usage. And Brian Thomas Jr. checked all those boxes this year. I think he could be a top 5 player, top 2. Shawn Siegel says he can be. If he can be that, I am winning lots and lots of money. Jayden Daniels, my quarterback 1, or my elite quarterback 1. I do have Bryson Jackson Dart up there that we went over already. I thought he can take a year to leap with Debo. I think McLaurin has a bit of a rough start because he wasn't with Terry this offseason. However, he had him fully to himself last year, and so they're still going to have opportunities and have the ability to work together. I was smashing Terry a lot in the 3rd round, actually, when I didn't like those players. I thought it was more on a bet on touchdowns. I thought he could just repeat what he did last year and he can go slightly at the same cost next year. I think this year he can probably have 1,200 yards and 9 touchdowns, and we'll be like, whoa, he did so good. But at the same, I think Terry McLaurin's a very kind of Mike Evans-y play, and people aren't seeing that. Tyrone Tracy was more of a bet on the Giants, maybe slightly underrated. I just liked where he was going all off season. I could have seen him like increase in ADP, but because of the Cam Scadaboo stuff that was going on all off season, I just thought he was kind of going undervalued. In August, there was a lot of just zero RBing that I was doing, and I thought he was the perfect guy. In my regular home league, I do have him and Neighbors betting on this Giants offense to do awesome this year. Hopefully those guys can pay off their ADP. Emeka Egbuka, a guy that I was really hammering from like pre-draft to about August, mid-August, early August. Only 16.8%. Doesn't look awesome. He was at about 24, 27%. Early in August, started to move away from him due to price. But I just like to see my guys rise in price than fall in price. Great off season with Baker. I thought he was more of a Ladd McConkey pick this year than a Brian Thomas pick. However, the way the summer is going, I think he can be a Brian Thomas for the year. Godwin not being there early in the year, maybe Evans not being there late in the year when Baker needs him most. I think Egbuka was a phenomenal pick. I think he's actually a pick I could be fading like I did Ladd this year, because he maybe goes too high next year. I think next year, if he goes higher than middle of round 3, I think I'll be a little bit skeptical. I think he can go probably, or Marv is going this year, Marvin Harrison. I think I'll be kind of in on him at cost. Probably slightly above weight on him, but I think he's a fine pick. But I just loved Egbuka at cost. Average exposure to him was 83.4. Just loved him on those stacks. I didn't get a lot of Baker with him actually, but he was like a piece on an efficient offense that I thought the Bucs were gonna be. I thought they were gonna regress a little bit. Because I think the Carolina Panthers are a little bit more stacked than they are, and a little bit more healthier and younger. I just liked the playoffs for him, and just his profile, the draft capital, the film. I loved everything about Egbuka this year. And I just wish I was hammering him a little bit more in the 5th round, early 6th round, while he was slowly climbing like I did with the other climbers. But I just really just stopped clicking him because I saw that I needed to catch up on other players. Um, and I think that was fine with him. I have to say about around basically the same, and he's a guy that kind of fell a little bit, but I've always liked his pick at cost. Um, Braylon Allen, Deebo Samuel, players that just all these players I like at cost. Sam Laporta, T.J. Hawkinson, Chuba Hubbard. It just depends on the build. Wandale, I kind of just slammed at the end. You can see the dollar amount on there. Zach Charbonnet. I just liked him to be above weight. Jalen Hurts was another elite QB I liked the most. DeAndre Swift, I was hammering him while he was low in the 70s. George Pickens was hitting him periodically. Golden, I kind of grabbed before I saw it. I witnessed the rise. Travis Hunter, I waited for his fall and I grabbed him at the fall. I thought he is a way better early 5th round pick, even though the players around him going there are difficult to pick him over. But in the draft process, like I said, when I was talking about Ted, I actually liked Travis Hunter a lot more. As a wide receiver, Bucky Irving, nice to see him at 12.5%. Early in the offseason, he was one of my bigger fades in the second round. After that, I said, why am I fading one of the best running backs that has a rookie as a wide receiver? His backup that he overtook, a running back that he shares a backfield with, he overtook in the middle of last year. I think they're going to give him more volume. I think he's one of the later running backs that has most of the volume. I think he's just the cheap Bijan Robinson. Possibly potentially better. I thought he was set up better than Devon Achane. Jameson Williams, I was able to get a little bit more of him. Also saw him in August, not being too high on him. He really didn't move all off season. Excuse me. All these picks around here were like guys that kind of caught up around from here on. Just picks that I just needed to catch up on, or guys that I really just maybe fell back on. And how that went this year. Good to see RJ Harvey at 10.1% now. Let's see. Jerry Jeudy, I was in on early and then kind of got in on him again once the rookies kind of passed him. So in the middle, in about July, I was not really in on him. In May, I was in on him. Later in August, in on him. Devontae Smith, I think I just needed to get a bit of exposure to him. Bo Nix, I actually wish I had a little bit more of him. I think Denver is set up quite nicely. Only 11%. Kenneth Walker III. if a guy on my Seahawks kills me for $2 million, I think it's worth it. So hopefully he doesn't kill me for 2 million, but you get the point. But I have to see him win in order for me to win. Kind of get it. As long as he's on one of my teams, and doesn't kill me in week 17. Let's see. Mason, I kind of stopped taking once he started to climb a little bit higher. Let's see the round 18 guys that I kind of got into. Chillin Lane, 11%. Myers, I was actually picking. Not an 18th round guy, but Jakobi Myers. That he was kind of like a Jerry Jeudy guy, where he was like fine at price. I thought he was like a fine click. I wasn't against him. Cascadable, 11.6%. That's cool. Marshawn Lloyd, I was into him a lot. Got hurt. Really fell off of him. Dontavian Wicks was into him a lot. Fell off of him. Grabbed other pieces, 12.3%. Coker got into him later in the year and then got hurt. Stopped drafting him. Kyle Managai was in on him periodically. He really didn't rise as high as I thought he should have risen. I think he's set up to be like the Kyren Williams of this year. We're really like saying, who's going to be the guy? Who's going to be the guy? If this Bears offense hits, I'm glad I had 10.5% of him. I wish I had more Lamar closer to Jalen Hurts, but I think 10.5% is enough. Jahmyr Gibbs, 10.1%. I think that's enough. Trey McBride, 10.1%. Hopefully that's enough. T. Higgins, he's a guy that really kind of hits, and you need him when he hits. Terry McLaurin, good on him. Calvin Ridley, I like to see that as well. Henderson Ladd, really nice to see. I'm at weight on them. I liked Travion pre-draft. I liked him at cost, but I thought he was still a little rich. If he was going in like the 7th, I would have liked it. But as I thought, I just waited on him, and he just like rose really high. Even as early as like the late third at the end of the season, I just couldn't do that. Especially on like a team that I really am not too high on. I think he gives off more of like a dead zone guy, but I think he could really kill me this year. Amon-Ra St. Brown, I liked him when I wasn't getting like a Gibbs, Brian Thomas, Puka. It was more like the Nico was the fade. Christian McCaffrey used to be the fade. I got even exposure to him. Jamar was just taking him at the 101, 8.7%. Like to see that. Justin Jefferson, 8.3%. Even with the field on Justin Jefferson. Puka, 8.3%. I liked Puka, and then I kind of didn't. Just because the Stafford stuff, the touchdown stuff. Roman Wilson got to 7.8%. Like to see that. Rome Odunze, 8.1%. Like to see that as well. Najee, 7.2%. Interesting that he's there. 6.9%. Malik Washington, late round guy. Mike Evans, 6.9. Slightly underweight on him. Xavier Worthy, 6.7%. Underweight on him. I just think I don't see him producing 1,200 yards, 10 touchdowns. Could be very wrong. He could be the new Deebo Samuel. I'm betting on more Deebo this year, actually. But those guys, it doesn't matter. You could bet on both of them. They can hit for both of their teams. I'm just saying they're gonna run the ball a bit more, and I think Pacheco's really gonna hurt me this year. Joe Burrow, 6.5%. Just wasn't getting him unless I was getting Jamar and T and used the guys all the exposures on him. Hampton really rose to another pick that was going early. I kind of got to evaluate the early guys. I'm pretty good at evaluating the guys rounds 8 and later, or at least 6 and later that could be going higher. The guys that are going in rounds 1 through 5 are those guys are the difficult guys that could rise and really hurt you and really scare you off drafting them high. Rashee Rice only 6.5%. I'm just not really on Casey this year. I don't even know where Patrick is at. Patrick only 4%. Last year I was down on him. Maybe hopefully that doesn't hurt me. Guys that I really faded this year that I think could hurt me, but hopefully they don't. I actually got a Jaleel McLaughlin pick. That's funny. A Bobo pick, a Dante Thornton pick, a Chris Rodriguez pick, a Chris Olave pick. I really faded Chris Olave. I have a lot of him actually. In the Superflex with Spencer Rattler. I did like Rattler late last year. As like a quarterback that could play later on. But I think it was more like he's not going to get in the end zone. I don't think the volume is there like we think it is. I just saw like Michael Pittman is actually kind of the same thing. Actually a better quarterback. Maybe he has more competition. But I think like Olave is actually overpriced than like a Myers or like a Judy due to that offensive environment, that dynamic there. Pollard, I was really not in on this year. I don't like to see 0.4% Tony Pollard. I liked him at price. But this now with the Spears injury is kind of scary. Taj Brooks, I just think Chase Brown gets majority of the work. Let's see. Josh Downs, I was not in on at price. Just thought he was expensive. Not gonna get touchdowns. Not gonna be on 2 receiver sets. He gets added competition with Tyler Warren. Quarterback situation's not there. Javonte Williams, not going to get as much volume. Kind of in a running back dead zone area, in my opinion. DJ Moore added to competition. Highest placed pick in that wide receiver room. Joshua Palmer, kind of betting on touchdowns, but I don't think like he was just like the Gabe Davis of this year, and I was not gonna bet on that. Again, Jaylen Warren, 0.7%. Just didn't like him in the film. I thought if it was the pieces that you needed on this offense, it was Tyreek or Achane. I got a couple Renfro shares, which is funny. Dallas Goedert, I really didn't like. I think if it's kind of like the Jalen Wright situation. It's going to be either Saquon or AJ Brown or Devontae Smith, and even Devontae Smith has like thin upside where you kind of need AJ Brown and Saquon to really get hit. Breece Hall was just negative stuff. I think if he gets traded, that's gonna hurt me. Kamara, basically the same as Breece. I think actually Kamara probably gets to the end zone more, probably gets maybe more volume. Kyler Murray, maybe he's fine with the upside, has higher upside than like Justin Fields. But I think he is what he is. I think he gets traded to Carolina Panthers. Just lose a couple wheels on that tractor and everything just goes sideways on that bus. Juwan Jennings, just injury concerns, not being the number one target in that offense. Jalen McMillan not liking the price. Injury, Jack Bash not liking the price. Injury, Hollywood not liking the price. Just fading these injured guys. Quentin Johnson just not liking the price. Everything that happens to him. 1.1%, 5 shares. Nick Chubb not liking the price. Austin Eckler, older guy. Stats look worse. Cooper Kupp not liking the price. Older guy. Maybe new team. Maybe everything works out with him. Maybe he's the guy in Seattle that hurts me throughout the season. I just think everything's just looking up for the new guys in Seattle. Haven't heard much FUD on how good Cooper Kupp looks. Adonai Mitchell just super crowded on a terrible team. Rashid Shaheed not liking the price. Terrible team. Michael Wilson, terrible team. Evan Ingram, just don't like the pick. David Montgomery, just don't like the pick. Tyler Warren, don't like the price. I like the prospect profile. I think he was the one that could really hurt me this year. Miles Sanders, don't think he's of any value. Trey Harris, don't like the price. Chris Godwin, don't like the price. 1.8%. All these guys were under Chris Godwin at 1.8%, less than 8 shares of 400 something. Roschon Johnson, only 9 shares, 2%. I like that. It was way higher than that. No, it was at like 14%. I was like, why do I have so much Roschon Johnson? Only 9 shares. That's very nice to see. Kind of a high price though, $132 for 9 shares. Maybe we got him on a couple BPMs that I don't like. Okay, Ricky Pearsall, just a guy that just climbed and did not chase up. Isaiah Pacheco, kind of the same price all season. I just was not looking for running backs there. Derrick Henry kind of capitulated at the end. Got 2.2%. I think he's kind of a guy that everybody not in on. I should have been in on. I just don't see Derrick Henry really falling off too hard. Maybe he has 1,400 yards and 10 touchdowns, but I could probably get a lot of volume of him next year, and next year he could probably have the same year, and then the year after that he probably retires. Penix, just not a super deep team, not into the Falcons this year. Waddle, don't think he's very talented. Garrett Wilson, bad situation. Adam Thielen was shooting for the cheaper pieces. Jonathan Taylor, don't like the price. Second round. Nico Collins, 2.9%, 13 shares. Not really into him. James Cook, another pick that I think he can hurt me in a significant way. Maybe gets more volume, slightly less touchdowns, but really gets more volume. George Kittle, 3.8%, 17 shares. Got him at the cheapest price. Got really expensive. I think he's more like the Mark Andrews, where he's not going to get a lot of volume. But I just think like a lot of these guys don't get a lot of volume in San Francisco. That I think hopefully Ayuk pays off. Ramondre really faded down the stretch, 4%. Everything with Travion comes up big for him. Luther Burton, I think he's more of a next year player type guy, but I think he could hit in a meaningful way. I think the coaching staff likes him. Drake London, I think I should have gotten at least at the field with London. Devontae Adams was more like a age thing. Gene T was more like an age thing. I think with running backs, I like to really bet on year 2 and 3 when they're so priced up, and then if they're rookies and it's priced really low, I think I'll more so hammer them. Caleb, I think I'm not scared of what he could do. Caleb was more of a bet, and the Bears were more of a bet on. I'm gonna go all in on the Bears. Like I'm gonna have every piece. This team is just firing at all cylinders. And if I was fading them, I was like, I'm not getting any Bears on my teams. I think that's how I played it. Marvin Harrison, I was in on, and then I stopped. I was getting him super expensive early in the third round. He's a guy with the touchdowns. I think he's kind of like a new Marvin Terry McLaurin, but with a worse quarterback. So I just like, and maybe Trey McBride is just the guy and doesn't regress. So it was like, if things go really wrong for Marvin Harrison, is he doesn't get the touchdowns Trey McBride does, and then he kind of like doesn't get any volume. So we take him next year at like, say, Flowers' price, and maybe with a new quarterback, and that's really interesting. Stephon Diggs, just an old guy, I think. Yeah, I think he can really kind of cook me. So can Pitts, maybe. Christian Kirk now injured again. I thought he could have a chance to really do something. Stroud is just not liking the pricing, and I don't think he's very fantasy relevant with his kind of the way he is used. Brock Purdy as well. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, I got him at mostly 175. Now going at 92. Cortland Sutton was like a whatever play. Travis Kelce was like a whatever play. Colston Loveland, like I said, if I was really in on the Bears, I was really in on them. Ray Davis was like a sure. Trey Benson, I tried to get more of at the end of the year, while he kind of slipped more. Saquon, just Saquon. Why would you fade Saquon? 6.3% is okay. I just like the other picks. And then like he plays, I think he can get the same usage, but the touchdowns are just not there. Sam Darnold, I don't think he has as much volume this year, and then we're back to where we ended with like Martin Hampton, Rishi Rice, Joe Burrow for the Josh Allen, actually 6.7%. I think the macro data shows that his stats are regressing. However, he's been a very fantasy viable quarterback. Who knows? Who knows with Allen? I don't like how he's going to hit in the playoff weeks. I think he's possibly maybe an advanced play, but I think I drafted good enough teams where I don't need that. I just like my picks. I liked it. I think my exposure showed me that I like the players where I chose them. I'm gonna show you you guys. It's already it's not hour 2 yet, but hour 1 has just came upon us. I'm gonna show you position round by round. First round, 70% wide receiver, 30% running back. Second round, wide receiver 47% of the time, running back 39% of the time, tight end 14% of the time. Round 3, quarterback 24% of the time, wide receiver 55% of the time, running back 14% of the time, tight end 7% of the time. Round 4, wide receiver yet again 62% of the time, quarterback 21% of the time, running back 14% of the time, tight end 2% of the time. Round 5, wide receiver 58% of the time, running back 36% of the time, quarterback 5% of the time, and tight end 1% of the time. Round 6, an underdog, wide receiver 62% of the time, running back 27% of the time, quarterback 5% of the time, and tight end 6% of the time. Round 7, wide receiver 53% of the time, running back 26% of the time, quarterback, tight end 17% of the time, and quarterback 4% of the time. Let me say that one more time because I slipped up a little bit. Round 7 in underdog, wide receiver 53% of the time, running back 26% of the time, tight end 17% of the time, and quarterback 4% of the time. So, and then round 8, wide receiver 44% of the time, 27% of the time was running back 27% of the time, tight end 15% of the time, and quarterback 14% of the time. So in the first 8 rounds, my whole roster, most of the time I'm going elite quarterback or hero running back, or going 0 RB and hammering wide receiver those first 8 rounds. Round 9, an underdog, wide receiver goes down from in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s to wide receiver 24% of the time, running back 33% of the time, quarterback 29% of the time, and tight end 14% of the time. In round 10, wide receiver goes down again to 20% of the time, running back 35% of the time, quarterback 31% of the time, and tight end 15% of the time. Round 11, running back or wide receiver goes down again to 13% of the time, running back 34% of the time, quarterback 32% of the time, and tight end 20% of the time. Round 12 goes down again to wide receiver 11% of the time, running back 46% of the time, quarterback 19% of the time, and tight end 23% of the time. It goes up again. I actually look at wide receiver once again in round 13, only 22% of the time, running back 36% of the time, quarterback 28% of the time, and tight end 13% of the time. In round 14, wide receiver goes up a little bit more with 30% of the time, running back with 35% of the time, quarterback 16% of the time, and tight end 19% of the time. In round 15, wide receiver goes up just a bit more at 28% of the time, running back 34% of the time, quarterback 13% of the time, and tight end at 25% of the time. In round 16, wide receiver goes up a little bit more, 30% of the time, running back 30% of the time, quarterback 17% of the time, and tight end 23% of the time. And in round 17 of Underdog, wide receiver climbs just a bit more to 41% of the time, running back 31% of the time, quarterback at 13% of the time, and tight end at 14% of the time. And then in round 18, wide receiver, I look for wide receivers 54% of the time, running backs 28% of the time, tight ends 11% of the time, and quarterbacks only 6% of the time. So I actually will probably screenshot this, take a picture of this one, and post this on my story, or post this on Instagram. I think that's a fascinating chart to look at. My exposures starting off with a lot of wide receivers to the first 8, from as high as 70% to 44% on the very low end, 47%. And then around 8 through like 12, or even 14, you could say. I'm only looking at wide receivers a quarter of the time, almost down to 10% of the time. And then in round 12, I go to 50% of the time I'm looking at running backs. And then from about round 8 onward, I'm looking at running backs mostly there. I think that is a very good way to understand what I was doing this year, my positional allocations. Nothing got too extreme. I think this one was fascinating. Only 1% of the time I was going tight end in the 5th round. And then round 12, 11% wide receiver. And I think around 18 was actually very interesting as well. Going back to running back, wide receiver, even a good amount of tight end, and slightly quarterback there. Okay, let's go to playoff stacks that I like the most. At the top, we see week 15, Giants Washington was my favorite game. Then who is this? Denver, Green Bay, okay. Dallas, Minnesota. Bengals, Bengals, Ravens, Rams, Lions, Chiefs, Chargers, Bucks, Falcons, can't think, too tired. Eagles, Raiders, Miami, Pittsburgh, Titans, 49ers, and so on and so forth. Actually, the team the games that I liked the least in week 15 was actually the team that I kind of liked the most in weeks 15 and 16. Carolina at New Orleans. So I think that's just going to be maybe a bloodbath with Carolina winning. Week 16, I liked Carolina versus Tampa Bay the most. Minnesota at the Giants. Jacksonville at Denver, then Dallas and Los Angeles Chargers. Rams at Seahawks. Washington at Philly at Washington. Chicago at Green Bay. Detroit at Pittsburgh. Houston at Vegas. Cincy at Miami. Baltimore at New England. KC at Tennessee. Indy at San Francisco. Arizona at Atlanta, and Buffalo at Cleveland. That was my least favorite. And week 17, Carolina, Seattle was my favorite. Dallas and Washington. Baltimore, Green Bay. I remembered all those. Detroit and Minnesota. Houston and the Chargers were up there. Wow, interesting. I guess who? Woody Marks. Oh, Higgins. Makes sense. Vegas and New York. Jacksonville, Indy. Interesting. Miami, Tampa. Okay. And the mini stacks were kind of the same. Alrighty, and then the roster builds. I don't think all my roster builds are in here. So 3672 was my favorite. 3573, 2682, 3582, 3663, 2592, 2772, 2673, 2583, 3483 was fun. 3564 was also fun. 2484, interesting. 2484, 3753, 1522. That one doesn't count, I don't think. I don't know what that was. But actually, those are interesting as well. I actually want to post my roster builds too. And then playoff stacks. Cool. Cool. Love to see it. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining me today. I wish you all luck this off season. I will keep you guys in tuned, maybe in the middle of the year or after the first week. We will look at some exposures again. Bye for now.